Speaking Myanmar, Lessons for English-Speaking Learners. The polite particle. In this lesson, I'll explain how and when to show added respect to your listener. I'll show you how to use the polite particle in two kinds of sentences. The first is a verb sentence. And since descriptive adjective sentences are treated like verb sentences, this rule will also apply to them. Lastly, I'll explain how to use the polite particle in an is sentence, one where you're describing what something is or who someone is. So let's begin. Here's what the polite particle looks like. As a particle, it has to be combined with other parts of speech. It's sometimes pronounced ba, but more often ba, depending on the sound of the preceding syllable. This particle adds no meaning other than to add politeness to your speech. To not use it implies that you view your listener as inferior. However, to use it too much almost sounds ingratiating, not genuine. So it should be used regularly when speaking with people who are older than you, or perhaps with teachers, monks, government officials. While it may not be used very often when talking with your peers, if you're talking to strangers of your own age, it sounds unfriendly if you don't include it in some of your speech. When a parent's talking with his child, or an employer to his employee, the polite particle doesn't have to be used. Now, the polite particle can be used in just about any kind of sentence. In this lesson, I'm going to cover simple statements. In the lesson on forming questions, we'll touch on it, but in everyday speech, the polite particle is seldom used in questions. There will also be a separate lesson on imperatives. When you request someone to do or not to do something, it's used extensively in this kind of sentence. But for now, let's look at one very common use of the polite particle. As I covered in another lesson, both a verb and an adjective sentence will use this positive sentence ending particle, te or de. To make that kind of sentence more polite or respectful, I'm going to place the polite particle ba or ba here, preceding the final particle. It now becomes ba de. Let's look at two very common uses. To say thank you is Jesu tende. But to add a degree of respect, you would say Jesu tembare. Again, notice the polite particle is added just prior to the final particle. Now, the reply to that statement of thanks is Yabare. That's the closest you're going to come to you're welcome. You can never go wrong using the polite particle with these two statements. But how would you use the polite particle with a negative sentence? Where does the polite particle fit in? Well, I'm going to use this sentence to explain where to put it. I live on this road would be di lama nebare. That's a positive statement. It has the positive particle at the end, preceded by the polite particle. But now remember, in order to make the sentence negative, we replace that affirmative final particle with the negative particle pair, the verb sandwiched in between those two. If you want to add the polite particle, notice its placement here in red. It comes right before the final particle, just as it does in the positive statement. And so it would read, Di lama mane babu. Our second type of sentence we're going to cover in this lesson, where use of the polite particle is more frequent, is the Myanmar is sentence. And remember, that's limited in scope to sentences that tell you what something is or who someone is. In this sentence, we use the passive to be verb, often the word is. It's pronounced pitte. For example, this is my wife. Da genozani pitte. But adding the polite particle in a sentence like this is done a little bit differently. Instead of adding it to the final particle, I replace the final particle with the polite pa or ba. So now to say this is my wife, I would say da genozani ba. Or to say this is my house, era geno imba. Now let's review this lesson. In the way of review, the polite particle is pronounced ba, or more often ba. It's used in speech to show respect and politeness. In verb and adjective sentences, the polite particle is added just before the final particle in both positive and negative statements. In an is sentence, the polite particle is used in place of the is verb and final particle. It becomes the final particle. Now really, listening to the everyday speech of others will be the most helpful thing you can do in deciding when to use the polite particle. Be warned, though, that when reading text or listening to news broadcasts, it will likely be used more than it would in everyday speech. And that finishes this lesson.